Okay, today's topic will be irritable bowel syndrome. Today's topic will be dealt in the terms of definition. We'll first deal with the definition of the topic, then the pathophysiology, followed by the clinical features, and then the investigations, diagnostic criteria. What are the red flag signs in the diagnosis of what are the red flag or the alarming signs in the irritable bowel syndrome, and finally coming to the treatment. What we need to understand over here, it's a functional disorder. It's a benign disorder, nothing much to worry about, but it's mostly related to the functional component. It's a functional disorder of the GIT characterized by abdominal pain and discomfort, and there will be altered bowel habits. Without any, you can't find any structural changes in the gut, or there's no infectious cause, or any, you can't, in the lab also, you can't find any biochemical abnormalities. So basically, that's being the functional disorder. It's a benign chronic symptom complex of you'll be having altered bowel habits, and along with that, you'll be having abdominal pain. Coming to the pathophysiology, usually there's no proposed theory, no accepted theory, but most commonly, which is thought to be the reason for the irritable bowel syndrome it can be gastrointestinal motor abnormalities. Usually in 75 to 80% of this, almost 70 to 70% of these patients, they'll be having motor abnormalities. That is, it will be different. One person's gut motor movement will be different from the other person's. So in this, there can be two types: constipation predominant type, where the visceral peristaltic waves are very less. That's a jejunal contraction waves are very less. So the colonic transit time is also more, and also the rectosigmoid activity is also less. That is the constipation predominant type. In the diarrhea predominant type, you'll be having a number of, like, multiple number of jejunal contraction waves. So the orocecal transit time, it's very much decreased, and you will have the diarrhea. The next proposed theory is the visceral hypersensitivity. Usually when we take food, there will be, because of the food intake, the intestinal distension will be there. So this dilatation, it will stimulate the sensory receptors. So usually in these patients, the sensory receptors are hyperactive, and this it causes visceral hypersensitivity. It causes abdominal pain. The next proposed theory will be central neural dysregulation. Usually all our emotional stress and all the other functional components, uh, they can play a role in the control of our GIT. An example is that when once we take the food and there is distal colonic distension is there, when an MRI was performed, the cingulate gyrus, there was hyperactivity is increased activity is seen in the cingulate gyrus, which shows that increased perception of the visceral pain will be there in these people. The other next feature will be abnormal, other proposed theories, abnormal psychological features. In 80% of these IBS patients, psychological factors can be seen. Like, it can be a normal minor emotional stress, or they can have insomnia, or and the next one will be altered intestinal flora. In short bowel syndrome, uh, usually majority of these people, it's associated with irritable bowel syndrome. The other one will be the abnormal serotonin pathways. Serotonin, it is important for the visceral sensitivity. So increased this hyper responsiveness is because of this serotonin mediated pathway. The other proposed theory is the post-infectious IBS. In the post-infectious IBS, usually after this E. coli, Salmonella, Shigella, and this Campylobacter, you can see the irritable bowel syndrome. The other one proposed theory will be the immune activation and mucosal inflammation. Um, this is also seen in these patients. So what are all the proposed theories of gastrointestinal motor abnormalities, where it is different in the diarrhea predominant type, and the different in the constipation predominant type. In the constipation predominant type, you'll be having decreased jejunal contraction waves. The next proposed one is the visceral hypersensitivity. These people, the visceral hypersensitivity is there, so which causes more perception and pain. Central neural dysregulation, where there will be increased activity of the mid-cingulate gyrus is there, and increased perception of the sensations. Abnormal psychological features will be there. In these, it's found in 80% of the patients, and these include depression, excessive worry can be there, insomnia can be there, or somatization disorders can also be seen in these patients. Altered intestinal flora, that is the short bowel syndromes, abnormal serotonin pathways, post-infectious IBS, and immune activation and mucosal inflammation. Coming to the clinical features, they usually present below the age of 45 years. Usual age of presentation will be 20 to 40 years of age, and female preponderance is seen in these IBS cases. 3 is to 1. Female is to male ratio will be 3 is to 1. Most consistent, most common key symptom for the diagnosis will be abdominal pain or discomfort. This abdominal pain usually it will be more localized towards the lower abdomen. You can have it in the right or the left iliac fossa. And this abdominal pain, it is increased with stress or lack of sleep or after intake of food. And it is relieved with passing of stools or the flatus. But this relief of pain is usually, it's only temporary. Abdominal pain is the most common key symptom for the diagnosis, most common prerequisite. It's like prerequisite for the diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. The next clinical feature will be the altered bowel habits, which is the most consistent feature. So it can be of two types: IBS where constipation component is predominant, and IBS where diarrhea component is predominant. In the constipation predominant type, you will have spastic colitis, and it is associated with chronic abdominal pain and constipation. Pain is a feature usually in constipation predominant type. In diarrhea predominant type, you will have chronic intermittent watery diarrhea. Often these people will not have abdominal pain. There's also one more pattern called mixed IBS, where you'll be having alternating diarrhea and constipation. Most common alteration in bowel habit is constipating alternating with diarrhea. When you describe the diarrhea, these people, they'll be having frequent defecation. Often it is painless. These are only low volume stools and associated with lot amount of mucus will be there. Small volume loose stools, and there'll be sense of incomplete evacuation will be there, and lot amount of mucus will be there. In this diarrhea predominant time, pain is usually not seen. It's often painless. This diarrhea is usually rare or it's almost never seen at night. In the constipation predominant type, you'll have infrequent pellet-like stool. This is called pencil-like or the ribbon-like stools. There'll be abdominal pain and proctalgia can also be there. The stools are hard with narrow caliber, accompanied by passing of large amount of mucus. And the other one more clinical feature which can be seen in these patients is the flatulence. These people will be complaining of bloating sensation. This is most commonly seen in females. And also postprandial tenesmus is also most common. It's due to exaggerated gastrocolic reflex. This is also most commonly seen in females. Postprandial tenesmus and gastrocolic reflex means immediately after consuming food, they need to pass stools. They might also have this abdominal pain because of the gastrocolic reflex. Other associated symptoms can be nausea, vomiting, dyspeptic symptoms can be seen, and other extraintestinal symptoms will be fatigue, myalgia can be seen, and also increased urinary frequencies can be seen in these people. On examination, as I told you earlier, it's just a function. It's a functional disorder. You can't find any structural abnormality, nor you can see any biochemical abnormality. So on examination also, you'll not find any abnormality, except that mild tenderness can be there. This tenderness also is usually seen in the most common in the left iliac fossa. That could be because of the palpable tender sigmoid colon. In the IBS constipation type, per rectal examination, when you do, there will be paradoxical contraction of the puborectalis muscle, and also decreased descent of the pelvic floor. That's a contraction, and the decreased descent of the pelvic floor muscle when simulating the bowel movement. Coming to next investigations. As like other things, you want, what are the investigations you want to do? You want to do a routine blood counts, that you want to do a HPTC, DC, ESR, and also the CRP over here. Stool examination, you want to rule out other infectious causes. You want to check for any ova, cyst, parasites, leukocytes, or the occult blood. Also you want to see sigmoidoscopy. Sigmoidoscopy, it is usually normal, but you, as you try to advance your scope, you can feel some resistance at the rectosigmoid curve because of the spasm. And also when you pass the scope inside, you can see increased peristaltic waves. Compared to a normal bowel movement, there is increased motor activity will be seen in this person who is having IBS. And within the bowel lumen, you can see abundant quantity of mucus will be there. Why do you want to do colonoscopy in these patients? Because you want to rule out colorectal cancer, that too in an elderly patient presenting with IBS-like symptoms, that is in diarrhea type thing. You want to rule out GI malignancy, so you want to do colonoscopy, especially in elderly presenting with the rectal bleed. Barium enema usually nowadays it's not done, but earlier it said that it's usually normal, except that there will be exaggerated the bowel lumen wall. You can see the hostrations. These hostrations, there will be exaggerated hostral markings and tubular appearance of the descending colon. In the persistent diarrhea type, what are all the other investigations you want to do? You want to rule out thyrotoxicosis, so you want to do a thyroid profile, or you can suspect even you have to rule out lactose intolerance. Someone who's having lactose intolerance, they will also have persistent diarrhea. That could be the change in the bowel habit after introduction, after taking this lactulose foods. So what is the test you want to do? Hydrogen breath test. Lactulose, for lactulose test intolerance testing, you want to do hydrogen breath test. And also you want to rule out celiac disease. The celiac disease, you want to do the serology, the antibodies test. And also the definitive diagnosis will be a biopsy for the celiac disease. And also you want to other differential one diagnosis will be microscopic colitis, which has to be ruled out in these people. And also like other tests for malabsorption syndromes, like there could be bile acid malabsorption. So these are the additional tests you want to do apart from the routine investigations. What is the diagnostic criteria? It is called Rome 3 diagnostic criteria. uh, what are the criteria, what are the three main criteria in these people? uh, you'll have recurrent abdominal pain or discomfort at least 3 days per month in the past 3 months. With the symptom onset, it should be at least 6 months prior to the diagnosis. So there'll be recurrent abdominal pain or discomfort for at least 3 days per month in the past 3 months, associated with any of the two or more, which are listed below. One being improvement, if there is improvement with defecation, or onset associated, that is onset of all this abdominal pain is associated with change in frequency of the stool, or the onset of the abdominal pain is associated with change in the form of the stool. So recurrent abdominal pain associated with two or more of these following: improvement with defecation, onset in change in frequency of the stool, change in form of the stool. What are the other symptoms which support the diagnosis of IBS? That is abnormal stool frequency, which is less than 3 bowel movements per week to greater than 3 bowel movements, greater than 3 per day. So the other suggestive supporting diagnostic feature will be abnormal stool form, that is the lumpy hard stool. As I told you earlier, it's like ribbon-like or pencil-like, pellet-like hard stools, or that is in the constipation predominant type. In the diarrhea predominant type, you'll be having loose watery stools and abundant amount of mucus. Defecation straining is there, or there is urgency, feeling of incomplete bowel movement, passing mucus, bloating. These are all the other supportive features which will help in the diagnosis of the IBS. What are the red flag signs of IBS? If there is more than minimal rectal bleeding, means you want to rule out, and that too in an elderly, more than minimal rectal bleeding in an elderly, you definitely want to rule out malignancy. Unexplained, more than unexplained weight loss or unexplained anemia, and if there are nocturnal symptoms, like we saw in the diarrhea predominant type, this passing stools is almost never or rare at night, because during sleep, as we told that it's a functional disorder, during sleep the sympathetic activity will decrease, the functional components, and there will be no stress, so there'll not be nocturnal symptoms. So once you're having nocturnal symptoms, that is a red flag sign of IBS. If there is any associated fever, usually these people they don't have fever. If any associated fever, you have to diagnose, you have to rule out other diseases. You might even think of the other infectious causes. Post infectious IBS is also there, following Salmonella, Shigella, or Campylobacter. Or if there is family history of selected diseases, like already it's running in families like colorectal cancer or any associated IBD, inflammatory bowel disease is there in the family members, or in the malabsorption syndromes like celiac too. So a family history with a fever, unexplained weight loss, unexplained anemia, nocturnal symptoms, and more than minimal rectal bleeding. These are all the red flag signs of IBS. So far, we are done with the definition, the pathophysiology, the clinical features, the diagnostic criteria of irritable bowel syndrome, what are the supporting features that will help in the diagnosis, and what are the red flag signs for the diagnosis of IBS. Next, coming to the treatment part. Treatment part, prior to the even starting, before starting the medication, the most important aspect which has to be dealt is a proper patient counseling has to be given, and if any dietary alterations should be made, we have to look into the diet of the patient. So why patient counseling is more important? Because this is a functional disorder. You need to explain the functional nature of the disease to the patient, and also you need to explain the benign nature, that it is not something dangerous. So like with counseling of this patient, once you reduce the stress factor, once the emotional component is also dealt with, then this IBS symptoms will settle down, and almost 50% of the patients with patient counseling. And then coming to the diet of the patient, you have to inquire the entire diet of the patient. Not in all IBS patients, but in few patients, unknown. Like you might not even know that these patients, these food items are precipitating the symptoms in these patients. It may not be common for all the patients. So you need to take the dietary history in detail, and then you need to identify which dietary component is aggravating the symptoms of the patient, and then better to avoid that which is aggravating. Ideally what happens is low FODMAP diet is advised in these patients. What is FODMAP? That is low FODMAP means fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. uh, so low FODMAP diet is recommended in these patients, and identify any diet which is precipitating the symptoms. Next treatment part will be based upon whether it is constipation predominant or it is diarrhea predominant. Constipation predominant type or diarrhea predominant type. Coming to the constipation predominant type, this is the patient counseling. And one more thing in dietary modification will be these patients, usually females, will be complaining of bloating and flatulence. So avoid foods which increase the flatulence, like beans, carrots, raisins, bananas, apricots, and also alcohol and caffeine. Decrease the high fat food content. And most important is, along with counseling, dietary modification, encourage physical activity in the patient. Next, coming to the treatment part for constipation predominant IBS. In constipation predominant IBS, you want to increase the bulk of the stool. So, stool bulking agents are advised. High fiber diet and bulking agents are advised, like bran and hydrofolic. This high fiber diet will increase the roughage content of the stool and below the colonic transit. If the symptoms persist after this dietary modification, that's you're adding fiber diet, even after that still symptoms are there, then add a bulk laxative like methyl cellulose, isabagol, husk, psyllium fiber supplement, and corn fiber. If it's like a stepwise thing. First is diet, fiber diet. Fiber diet is not sufficient, add laxative. If fiber diet is failing, first try bulk laxatives. If that's also failing, try osmotic laxatives like polyethylene glycol and the lactulose or magnesium oxide. Or then give secretory stimulators like lubiprostone. This is a chloride channel related. Lubiprostone is chloride channel. In the constipation predominant type, still you want to increase the gut motility in these patients, because there is decreased jejunal contraction waves in these patients. Initially, in the earlier trials and all, tegaserod, that is the 5 serotonin receptor agonist, it's a prokinetic drug. It will be stimulating the intestinal peristalsis, but it is withdrawn from the market because of the serious cardiovascular side effects. And other things, other prokinetic agents which come fall under this group are cisapride and nosapride. Coming to the antispasmodics, these patients will be having In the constipation predominant type, you will be having chronic abdominal pain will be there. That's one of the major clinical feature in these patients. So you want to add antispasmodics. Synthetic anticholinergic agents like dicyclomine can be tried, that is 10 mg TID, and also mebivarin can be tried, 135 mg TID. As it's a functional disorder, still you want to target the functional component also. So antidepressants can also be tried. In patients with intractable symptoms, that is, you have tried all these, or you have tried the patient counseling aspect, you have tried dietary modifications, you have tried physical activity, you have tried stool bulking agents, prokinetic agents, antispasmodics, but still, so then deal with the functional component of the patient. Tricyclic antidepressants like amitriptyline and desipramine, that is 10 to 25 mg, give at bedtime. With respect to anti-flatulence therapy, what you can advise to the patient? Ask the patient to chew the food properly, and then eat slowly. Avoid carbonated drinks. And rifaximin, antibiotic rifaximin, 400 mg TID also relieves the bloating. As I told you, lubiprostone. In the previous slide, we have discussed about lubiprostone somewhere. One second. Yeah, you can see the near the secretory stimulators. I have told you lubiprostone. I told you that it's a chloride channel activator. Lubiprostone activates the chloride channel in the intestinal epithelial cells. So after this activation, what will happen? There'll be movement of sodium and water into the lumen, and the stool quantity in the lumen will increase, and then so it improves the bowel function. Next, coming to the diarrhea predominant IBS type. In the diarrhea predominant IBS type, here you will advise the patient to avoid legumes and high fiber diet. Anti-diarrheal agents like loperamide, that is 2 to 4 mg up to 4 times a day to maximum 12 grams per day can be given. And by cholestyramine, these are bile acid binding agents. If you're having bile acid malabsorption, usually what should happen? These should be reabsorbed. So, but they are not reabsorbed, so they will pass in the stools. And bile acid, you'll be having, because of bile acid malabsorption, you'll be having diarrhea also. So, cholestyramine resin, that is bile acid binding agent, 4 grams can be tried. That it can be given 4 to 6 times per day. The other next in the diarrhea predominant type, what you want to try is serotonin receptor antagonist. Serotonin acts on the 5-HT3 receptors and increases the sensitivity of the afferent neurons of the gut. So these patients, they'll perceive the pain. This will help in pain perception. So you want to antagonize, you want to block that effect of the serotonin. So serotonin receptor antagonists will be given. Allocitron, it reduces the abdominal visceral pain, helps in rectal relaxation, increases the rectal compliance, and delays the colonic transfer. So basically, you are blocking the uh, sensation of visceral pain, which is being carried through the serotonin by giving serotonin receptor antagonists. The other treatment will be antispasmodics for pain relief, like we have discussed earlier. Antispasmodics like this dicyclomine and mebivarin can be given. Antibiotics like rifaximin 400 mg BD for 5 to 6 weeks, and probiotics. The role of probiotics is not completely proven, but probiotics are being tried. Bifidobacterium, Saccharomyces boulardii. There is some amount of efficacy is seen in the trials. The other treatment which is still in trials for the irritable bowel syndrome is the kappa opioid receptor agonist, that is asimidolin. This is the flowchart of the entire management of the irritable bowel syndrome. So first the patient comes to you, and based upon the symptom complex, you will be putting your diagnosis as like one of the, you can think about a differential diagnosis. Your first differential diagnosis is irritable bowel syndrome. So how do you prove that it is irritable bowel syndrome? First thing is reassure the patient, make some dietary modifications. Symptom resolves, well and good. If there is other symptomatic treatment can be added. If there is flatulence and bloating, give the dietary advice like completely chewing and eating slowly. And then also you can give smooth muscle relaxants, serotonin agonists and antagonists can be tried. Anti-flatulence can be given. If there is altered bowel function, uh, just check to which category it belongs, whether constipation predominant type or the diarrhea predominant type. If there is constipation predominant type, you want to give the stool bulking agents to increase the peristaltic movements. That is, you want to form a stool bulk which will cause intestinal distension, that will stimulate the receptors and then increase the motor activity. So stool bulking agents, what are the things you can do? You want to give high fiber diet, and then if high fiber diet it's not sufficient, you want to give bulk laxatives. That is, if high fiber diet fails, you want to give even osmotic laxatives like PEG and polyethylene glycol and lactulose. And also you want to add serotonin receptor antagonist, alosetron. Prokinetics can be added. If still there is persistence of symptoms in spite of all this, like in this constipation predominant column, you have done all these steps from above, but still the symptoms are persisting, then add an antidepressant, because you want to target the functional component also. If any functional component you want to resolve even that problem, so add tricyclic antidepressants. And then coming to the diarrhea predominant component, diarrhea predominant type, you want to avoid high fiber, you want to avoid legumes. Anti-diarrheal drugs like loperamide, cholestyramine for bile acid binding resins, and then serotonin receptor antagonists. To relieve the abdominal pain, smooth muscle relaxant, serotonin antagonists, tricyclic antidepressants, and SSRIs. This functional component is important because in this it is noticed that usually this functional component, it is most common, which is supporting this is most common in females. Females to males ratio is 3:1, and this females, this postprandial gastrocolic reflex is more in females who are having more of emotional stress. In this chart, I want you to concentrate on the one on those which are written in the put in the box. Age greater than 50 years. Usually diagnosis will be below 45 years. The age of diagnosis will be 20 to 40. What are the alarming features? Elderly person. If there is the presence of any chills, that these are all red flag signs. What I mean to say is, if there is any fever or unexplained weight loss, or if there is any family history of GI malignancy is there, family history of inflammatory bowel disease is there, or family history of any other celiac disease is there. So this is also one of the red flag sign. Or severe unresponsive diarrhea is there patient, and severe unresponding abdominal pain. If there is a more than minimal GI rectal, more than minimal rectal bleeding is there. If there are nocturnal symptoms, or upon physical examination, as I told you, like in examination you will not find anything abnormal, but in some patients you might find a tender, there might be tenderness in the left iliac fossa because of the palpable, because of the tender sigmoid colon. But apart from that, you will not find any other abnormalities in the patients. But what is a red flag sign? When you find any abdominal mass, or if there are any lymphadenopathy is there, or if there is any associated arthritis is there, or if any skin abnormalities is there, abnormalities are associated. These are all the red flag signs of irritable bowel syndrome. What are the other differential diagnoses you want to rule out? So as I told you earlier, you want to rule out thyroid in the diarrhea predominant type, you want to rule out thyrotoxicosis. So you want to do your thyroid profile and antibody testing for celiac disease. You want to do, who is presenting, an elderly presenting with more than minimal rectal bleeding, you want to do a colonoscopy because you want to rule out colorectal malignancy. You also have to, one of the differential diagnosis will be lactulose intolerance. So you want to do your hydrogen breath test. And the basic thing is you want to rule out any other infectious causes of infectious diseases. So you do a stool examination for occult blood, ova, parasite, cysts. This is a extra, these are the extra tests which are needed when you're having these red flag signs, or you want to differentiate from the other uh, closely resembling diseases. That is the end of the topic. So basically, your take-home message will be this flow chart. If you remember this flow chart, writing representing the entire information would be very easy. So this, you just need to make a note of this flow chart. The other important one which I want you to remember at the end of this topic is the red flag signs. These are the things which has to be noted down. Red flag signs of IBS. And the most important criteria for diagnosis is the Rome 3 diagnostic criteria. It can be your 2 marks question also. A simple 2 marks question can be asked, or in your 4 marks question, your IBS, usually it's a 4 marks question. If you are asked as a 4 marks question, you definitely need to write down the Rome 3 diagnostic criteria. You have to remember this one. That is a recurrent abdominal pain or discomfort for at least 3 days per month in the past 3 months. And the symptoms usually would have started 6 months earlier to the diagnosis, associated with 2 or more of the following. That is improvement in defecation, onset associated with change in frequency of stool, and onset associated with change in form of the stool. This is the important one. Usually this diagnosis of this disease is not through investigations. It is mainly through the history you take from the patient. Because an examination, general examination of the patient, you might not find anything. And the most other important point which has to be remembered at the end of this topic is the pathophysiology of the irritable bowel syndrome. You just need to make a mention of this pathophysiology points. That is the motor abnormalities, which will be different in the constipation type and which will be different in the diarrhea predominant type. Constipation predominant type, on one hand, you'll be having decreased jejunal contraction waves. Diarrhea, you'll have increased contraction waves. There is visceral hypersensitivity is there in this patient, which is mediated through serotonin. Central neural dysregulation. Means this your cingulate gyrus. Uh, uh, Once there is a distal colonic stimulation will be there, cingulate gyrus will be cingulate gyrus will be stimulated, and then that will cause increased visceral responsiveness. Increased responsiveness to the visceral pain means they'll be more sensitive to the pain, visceral pain. Abnormal psychological features, somatization disorders can be seen, emotional stress will be seen, insomnia will be seen in these patients. Altered intestinal flora. Most of these patients associated with short bowel syndrome. Abnormal serotonin pathways, like I told you, increased hyperresponsiveness will be seen in these patients. Post-infectious IBS can be seen in Salmonella, Shigella, and Campylobacter. And it's also another accepted theory is immune activation and mucosal inflammation will be seen. So apart from that, so at the end of the session, your take-home message will be have to diagnose irritable bowel syndrome. Your irritable bowel syndrome diagnosis through history taking only majority. You'll not get anything through investigations. The next point will be remember the Rome 3 diagnostic criteria. The next will be the management chart. So these are the 3 things you need to remember at the end of this topic. Okay, that ends the topic. If anyone has any questions, you can post in the chat box. Your next week seminar topic will be informed to you maybe by today evening, and we'll inform the topic, and also the students will be known. Students also will be picked up, randomly selected. So I'm here to take any questions. Okay, if no more questions, then we'll end the session over here. This is the one which I am mentioning. Okay, then no more questions. We'll end the session. Thank you.